Okay, I don't know why Sir John Pendry has not been getting more attention on the internet. Um, but basically, he discovered the same secret that I discovered. You know, I mean, he's doing implementing it as research. Let me look up John Pendry. But okay, 7 months ago, metamaterials open up new horizons in electromagnetism. 7 months. Oh, that's a um 14-minute talk. So um here we go. Here's one month. Oh, that's a talk from a long time ago. Yeah, there's really not much on the internet. He got the Kyoto Prize a year ago. Noam Chomsky got the Kyoto Prize. Um anyway, so I did a blog post on the latest from Sir John Pendry. I've been covering his stuff for, I don't know, 10 years, following his research. The interaction between modes with frequencies of opposite sign can lead to negative mass like instabilities in the system, invariably correlates with a superluminal regime. Our study offers practical insights into how to efficiently extract gain from time variant systems with potential applications in photonic circuits. So, this is the latest of his research. Contradictions can then arise if we continue to view a photon's energy as h bar times angular frequency. There are, for instance, negative frequency components in the free space electromagnetic field, yet each photon only ever contributes a positive energy to the total. This positivity of the energy can be traced back to the definition of the photon creation and annihilation operators. The importance of waves that make transitions across the positive or negative frequency divide to the emission of radiation. We shall show that such emission is essentially a quantum process associated with the creation of photon pairs, qubits. The off-diagonal elements represent transitions between different wave frequencies. So these off-diagonal elements is the same thing as non-commutativity. That's what non-commutativity is. So the transitions are not commutated between the different frequencies. The time is non-local. So you have this negative mass as negative energy, but the effect is only to convert virtual negative frequency photons into positive um, frequency photon energy. Neither energy nor frequency is conserved, but conservation violation comes in different forms for each. Although a positive frequency mode entering the time-dependent region may emerge as a negative frequency one, this does not indicate that the final photon state has a negative energy. As discussed above, in free space, all photons have a positive energy, and the quantum of energy will always be given by h bar squared, or h bar times angular frequency. Instead, as we shall see, a change in the sign of the frequency indicates a transformation of a creation operator into an annihilation operator, which in turn affects how we count frequencies. Therefore, although negative frequencies do not here imply negative energies, they are nonetheless central to understanding quantum processes occurring within space-time varying media. In a rotationally symmetric system that conserves spin, direct transitions of photons from positive to negative frequency are forbidden because reversing frequency reverses spin. Access to negative frequencies is facilitated by the creation of photon pairs comprising both a positive and a negative frequency, thus satisfying spin conservation, but by a process that has no classical counterpart, and is responsible for the radiation produced by these systems operating on the ground state. So he's relying on quantum entanglement to of the photons to then create a second harmonic which has a negative frequency, and that second harmonic with the negative frequency has an opposite spin. But that does not change the it doesn't cause negative energy. What it does do is increase the intensity of the photons. In other words, the number of photons are then increased. So you're increasing the positive energy by the fact that you're actually converting the virtual photons into increased number of um, positive photons through this through something that does not move as defined by inertia. It is in a state of no motion, um, as defined by inertia, but it does have resonance in terms of harmonics. And because of that, those harmonics that are non-local in time, you have this conversion of negative frequency into positive frequency through this asymmetric time dynamic. And this is precisely the same secret of meditation that's called turning the light around in meditation. And it's the same secret of how meditation is also precognitive and gravitationally repulsive as a newly discovered force, this quantum potential force. So now we can look at this paper that goes into Martin Vandermark and Gerard de Hooft, who analyzed. They had a paper called "Light is Heavy" about the one half spin causing this gravitational mass of light. Um, and so then John G. Williamson worked with Martin Vandermark to develop that model. And so somebody else analyzed it recently, and they said in the model of Williamson, the factor 2 that appears in Dirac theory in the spin, magnetic moment, and Zitterbewegung, that's German, frequency, comes from the fact that we have a double loop. So the wavelength equals 4 pi times the radius, in other words, like a sphere. The spin is not an intrinsic property of the electron. So what they're arguing is that all matter is actually made of the photons that inherently have this negative frequency and positive frequency at the same time as a double loop. That's like a Mobius strip or a non-commutative torus. It so you have this fifth dimension of time and frequency that's before space-time exists. It emerges as a tangible physical phenomenon arising from the underlying electrodynamics at the Compton scale. So again, this is due to the speed of light being invariant based on relativity, and this is what Louis de Broglie first discovered as the law of phase harmony when he was critiquing relativity, and he said that there has to be this time reverse signal from the future as a pilot wave. Moreover, in both models, the charge is understood as the divergent signature of a given self-oscillating electromagnetic field. This reinterpretation of charge as a field signature aligns with the model of the electron as a self-interacting electromagnetic field, potentially resolving the paradoxes associated with point-like and or extended charge distributions. So the big point of Martin Vandermark with Gerard de Hoof in their paper Light is Heavy is that you can have no center of mass with the light because the due to relativity you're converting the energy into mass. And since the energy is defined by the momentum, which is then directly proportional to the frequency is actually inherently asymmetric as time frequency non-commutativity. So because of that inherently asymmetric non-commutative time frequency, you can never have a center of mass that you're measuring as as the photon inherently. So that's what Sir John Pendry is talking about as the difference between the creation and annihilation operator. When you transforming one into the other, that's this asymmetric process of how you count photons. Okay, so the correct value of the Lorentz force in Dos Santos model further justifies this closed orbit assumption. So in relativity, the Lorentz invariance is actually non-commutative, and that's the big point of Professor Alberto Martinez in his books on Einstein. He's pointing out that the fact that Lorentz invariance is actually non-commutative is ignored by most physicists. So basically, you're just combining the non-commutative Lorentz um, transformations with the non-commutative time frequency of quantum physics. This perspective suggests that charge and charge density might be emergent properties of field dynamics at the Compton scale rather than intrinsic properties. Finally, in this model, following the lead of David Hestenes, we identify the electron's rest mass with its electromagnetic field energy. This concept aligns with Einstein's equivalence principle, positing that mass is purely a form of energy. Um, so this is Penrose's big point, is that when you have the non-locality, it violates the equivalence principle. So his claim is that gravity is what's causing the collapse of the wave function, but what Sir John Pendry is doing is instead starting with this entangled photon and then resonating the inherent non-local negative frequency that's exists before you collapse the photon into a particle. So because you have two photons that are super positioned and entangled, you're assuming that they're already non-local, and because they're non-local, the negative frequency already exists, and you can convert the negative frequency into an increased number of photons through this resonance process. And that resonance process is also the measurement process itself. And so essentially that would be like the creation of gravity itself through the measurement process, um, because you're converting it into this symmetric um, h bar squared, or h bar times the angular frequency, or what they say down here is 4 pi times the radius, which is the sphere. That's the definition of the wavelength. So so essentially you have this inherent non-commutative twist to the sphere in the block sphere, the quantum block sphere. So this is the comment I had put to a neighbor of mine who's been studying this stuff, and I was studying Sir John Pendry's work yesterday. They are designing non-local time signals. This means that a photon can have a second order harmonic that is the opposite frequency as a negative frequency with opposite spin. It does not have negative energy since it has no mass. This is wrongly assuming an external observation measurement as per relativity. In meditation, you quote turn the light around directly so you are the speed of light. Sir John Pendry is working with quote phase velocity for matter that is quote not moving. The phase velocity is also what is relied on in meditation, meaning without moving the light is turned around, and so you get superluminal velocity that is non-local with a negative frequency. The difference in meditating is the light has gravitational mass, since it is part of your physical body with mass, and so the light has quote negative mass or gravitational repulsive force that is also precognitive. This is a newly discovered force that Louis de Broglie called the quote pilot wave, and David Bohm called it the quote quantum potential. What this means is that time and frequency are not just reversed and negative, respectively, but that the quote asymmetric time is also negentropic. So it both organizes matter from the future as quote active information. And that term's from David Bohm and Basil J. Hiley, but it also propels the creation of matter against gravity. Life is based on negentropy, while gravity is based on increasing entropy as an external observation. Therefore, 99.99% of scientists as physicists learn gravity first, and thus they have the wrong foundation in science, and time and frequency are inherently asymmetric and non-local through meditation. So that sums up my spin on Sir John Pendry's really awesome research. And basically Professor Robert Flack was going to do weak measurements with mass with Basil J. Hiley, and so I contacted Professor Flack about after Professor Hiley's passing, and he said that they are planning on publishing a book. Um, I don't know if it'll just be based on the conference that they just had about in recently, that Professor Hiley was going to speak at this conference, but I guess his health, he's having health problems, and he didn't. So he didn't survive for that conference, and the thing is that that conference does not focus on non-commutativity. Actually, I haven't listened to all the talks in that conference, so I should definitely still do that. Um, but yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see if Robert Flack is able to continue Basil J. Hiley's work, where basically they wanted to test the weak measurements using mass instead of just photons, because the problem is how do you convert the non-commutativity into gravitational mass, when because if it's just photons, there's no inertial mass, and so you end up getting this like infinity in the measurement. um I don't understand all the details, obviously, since I'm not a physicist, but yeah, personally, I think that Sir John Pendry just working with the photons created more photons, and they're basically saying, well, you can use this for all sorts of technology, and the photons can be used as energy. Um, I think that the as far as the um Like, there's also the cold fusion claims of Fabio Cardone, where he's working with ultrasound, and but it's the same principle where you're getting a negative frequency and a time reversed what superluminal signal. That's also a superluminal energy that essentially is a negative energy transmutation as cold fusion. And so when he's using ultrasound, he's working directly with matter. So he's using iron and um, so that would be similar to what instead of using just photons, you're using matter. And of course, in meditation, we're also working with matter in our bodies, the Jing energy. And Daniel Pinchbeck actually just did a post recently on ectoplasm and what is ectoplasm and does it really exist? And um, looking at the early parapsychology research and the claims about ectoplasm. And it's kind of an interesting idea. Like, I do believe that um, there is transmutation and there's also um, teleportation. And from what I've read about Qigong experiments, there's teleportation has been demonstrated along with transmutation. And I mentioned recently how Qigong master Chun Yulin, he gave a story about one of the healings he did where they when they opened up the patient to do the surgery, there had been internal bleeding, and they found a bag around the blood that was holding the blood in, and that's what he had visualized was creating this bag to stop the internal bleeding. And he told that story like way back, when I first was taking his classes. So it was probably like 2001. And so the question is, well, I mean, another story he told was how he got a flat tire when he was driving, and he just instead of like pulling over to change the tire, he just visualized that the tires held the air, and so he was able to stop the leak. And then as soon as he got into his driveway, he said his tires just like went flat again because he stopped. Um, and then Qigong master Yan Shen, he tells this story how there was a car that would not start, and he visualized energy coming from the electrical high voltage line above them, the power line, and then the car started smoking, and it started, and then he realized he had used too much energy, and so he then reversed the energy, and the car stopped smoking, and they could drive the car. And his point there was that the energy is always bidirectional. And so bidirectional, that's literally this phase reversal that it's the phase velocity that Sir John Pendry is focused on, where you have this negative frequency that's a phase velocity, and it's therefore superluminal. And um, Yan Shen, he even uses the term. Let's see if I have it. I have it in one of my blogs. Um, um, let's see what he calls it. Yeah, he calls it the high energy substances of the subconscious mind. They should be one's guiding force. So, um, that's implying this precognitive virtual. He also calls it virtual information healing. So the virtual information healing is precognitive, and it's also high energy, meaning literally like quantum high energy, um, like transmutation energy. And by guiding force, that's what he means. Like it's precognitive information. Um, so when you're meditating, you can get precognitive visions that are more real than being awake because they're actually causing this transmutation of matter. And that's what this book, Transcendent Healing, is about by Christina Donnell. Transcendent Healing. And somebody got mad at somebody was interviewing her. This guy, he does this Buddha at the gas pump, and he got mad at her because he's like, well, um, he told her, you know, would you change what you saw in the vision? Would you try to fix it? Like if somebody was being killed or being hurt or something, and she said no, and he thought that that was wrong, and he got mad. But when Yan Shin says that this should be your guiding force, the what you're doing is you're converting the subconscious mind into the superconscious, and the superconsciousness is impersonal. So it's precognitive. You have these precognitive visions. Um, it's it's not just you seeing the future, but it's also the future being created by what you're by your own transformation of your subconsciousness. And so the question is, if you had not done the meditation to have that precognitive vision, would the future have been different in the first place? That's like in the Matrix movie, where the Oracle makes fun of Neo, when I think he like drops a glass of milk or something when she gives him a cookie, or I can't remember, and he's like, she's like, well, would have you have dropped the glass if you hadn't taken the cookie? And so the point being that if you stay in the emptiness, you can constantly be clearing out the energy blockages of the future. And this is what this is Chun Yulin's big point in his latest book called The Enlightenment Promise. I have it. Yeah, I have it right here. So he calls it I think he calls it unknown ignorance. And basically he says that his final stage of training was he learned how to constantly empty out the unknown ignorance. So he's like constantly transforming these subconscious perceptions that are going on all the time, um, through the superconsciousness, which is precognitive. And um, I mean, the what is I'm looking for that term, but it basically calls it unknown ignorance is what you're like. In Buddhism they call it prana, which is wisdom. So you have to have these precognitive visions that are more real than being awake. And see, he says that whenever he's talking to somebody, he's at the same time he's doing the small universe meditation, automatically. And so as he's doing that small universe meditation, he's actually healing the person he's talking to. And he said that he learned from another qigong master that it's actually like a Buddhist qigong master. He learned that the best way to heal other people is to heal yourself first, precognitively. So you're actually constantly precognitively healing your own body, and then when you interact with other people, you're holographically, you know, like combining with their energy. But since you've already precognitively healed yourself, when you combine with the other person, you've already transformed who they are from the future. And he said the big problem is that when people meditate, they identify with their own body too much, and they don't realize that the emptiness is impersonal, and it's therefore it's like this larger, it's larger than you as as a single person, and you have to identify with the universe as a whole instead of just yourself. And when you do that, then you realize that you're, essentially like he's left the matrix kind of thing. And I mean, this I you know it's I think it's awesome, but at the same time, he also he's basically like, well, if you don't practice this, then you're going to be in trouble. I mean, he doesn't say that outright, but he gives the example of somebody he does not name, but I know who they are, and he says, well, they didn't. He says they were given three chances, and the third chance, after they messed up the third time, then it was too late. And I know the backstory. I know the I was told the details of what happened, and it was for that person, and it's really wild story. Like, um I basically got initiated into this secret society because my teachers, they told me, there's things I can't talk about that they told me, about that they've experienced. And and so um yeah, so it's kind of intense because it's like, well, uh you know I'd like to just not be able to practice, but then you realize, well, you don't really have a choice because this is the truth of reality, and there's no escape. Um, this greater, larger thing. Yeah, if you meditate, I recommend getting the Small Universe meditation CD, and or it's a digital download if you want to do it that way. And from Spring Force Qigong, and I have a free book called I have a free book called Ancient Advanced Acoustic Alchemy, and I just put that practice in the context of Western Asia, connecting it back to Pythagorean philosophy, and basically, like, I've been reading Dr. Robert M. Price, and he argues that that's the truth of Christianity is this sacred king, like, battle with the dragon, the queen mother dragon, which is the Kundalini energy of the universe. And it's not just a battle; it's like you become part of this Kundalini universal energy. And he's saying that that's the truth of Judaism and also Christianity and stuff. It's really fascinating. I emailed Robert Price, but he doesn't believe in the no, that's all right. I was about to wrap up, so I appreciate your comment. And um yeah, so I mean, my energy, I experienced really strong energy. Like, I had some really wild experiences that I've written about before. But the problem is this: when the energy gets so strong, it's hard to control the energy, and that's what makes somebody a qigong master is they learn to control the energy. And even though Chen Yulin, he's talked about, like, in his early days, like in the U.S., if he got mad, the lawnmower would start smoking, or the light bulbs in his house would explode. And um, I mean, with the first Qigong master I experienced, the security guard walked in the room and said, "I'm just wondering what's going on in here because a fuse got blown in the room behind you." I mean, this stuff, like, I used to get shocks in the middle of my brain when the propane heater would kick on when I was meditating, or not even, it's like, or during the solstice. One time I was meditating during the winter solstice, and I got this really strong shock in the middle of my brain. Um, so my point is like, the more you meditate, you're actually like messing with civilization because you're directly tapping into this, what Sir John Pendry has discovered as the truth of reality, which is this non-local negative frequency time asymmetric time process that he can then convert into photon energy. And what's really wild about it is he's like saying there is no negative energy due to this of the invariance of the speed of light and the annihilation and destruction operators. So you have, essentially you're having a symmetric measurement process, and when you convert it into an external observation, and so in those terms, it will eternally, it's what they call the absolute void in Eastern philosophy. So the truth of the universe is this eternal creation of matter through the radiation of light, and this is what Sir Roger Penrose has been talking about. He's like, well, before the Big Bang, there was this asymmetric time and negative frequency, and he hasn't quite like converted that into quantum biology, because he he calls his Palatial Twister model non-commutative, and he knows it's not non-commutative, but then when he tries to study quantum physics, he gets stuck on the relativity part, and he's like, well, gravity is causing the collapse of the wave function. But the point of Basil J. Hiley is that you don't even need the wave function, because the spin exists when a photon is neither a wave nor a particle. You still have that spin, so you can have frequency and time without it being a symmetric mathematics. You have to, well, to be honest, like, people are going to think like, I would love to just sit in my room and meditate all the time, but people, since people do not understand, you can actually create energy by doing meditation. You can create spiritual powers or whatever, but so they think it's a total waste of time, because most people are brought up as materialists. Even in Christianity, it's all based on Platonic philosophy, and Platonic philosophy is what they call materialistic idealism, which is the irrational magnitude, measurement process. And so, if you like, when you do deep meditation, you're literally doing an exorcism of people around you. It's like a space-time vortex, and so people will start freaking out around you. And Wilhelm Reich called it negative transference. And so, he was critiquing like fascism and stuff. And so, like, the best thing you can do ideally is like to wake up really early. Like Qigong Master Chen Yulin, he wakes up at 3 a.m. every day to meditate. And ideally, if you could wake up at 3 a.m., then you're not going to be bothered because people are still asleep, And he said that otherwise, for advanced training, you need to go to a monastery or on retreat. Like, he did his advanced training at Mount Qingchang, Mount Qingchang, which is a sacred mountain, Taoist Buddhist sacred mountain in China. Actually, there's this. If you go to qigongmaster.com, that's one, what's his name? Forgot his full name now. Wan Meng is his first name. I can't remember the last name, but yeah, he does the cave meditation that Chen Yulin did. So Chen Yulin went 28 days in the cave in full lotus meditation, and when he came out, he levitated up 9 feet. And there's a Western monk, Saint Joseph de Cupertino, and there's a guy who's written books on him. Professor Michael Grosso. I have his books, but one of them, the book's called The Man Who Could Fly. And essentially, it's really funny because this was in the 1600s, and the Christian church didn't know what to do with the guy, and so they kept like locking him up into a room because they were embarrassed by his levitation. But they didn't realize that by locking him into his room, he would just meditate more. He would call it prayer, I guess, but you have your eyes closed and you worship the Holy Mother Mary or whatever. So and then when he got out of the room, if he saw a photo of her, he would just start levitating. and so, and there's all these testimonies about him levitating, but there are testimonies against him, protesting the fact that he was levitating all the time. And so it's just like, it's another example of this. If you like, it's ironic because they didn't know what to do with the guy, and then it just made the problem worse. So, like nowadays, like if you get put in prison, they probably would not let you meditate. Like if you sat in full lotus in prison or something, because they'll monitor. They'll have the lights on 24 hours, and you want to have darkness if you're meditating. Um, they would like probably like not let you be in that like full lotus yoga position or something. They'd probably like stop you or something. I don't know. I mean, it's like, there's a like I said, you're basically doing an exorcism of this negative frequency. And what in Taoism it's called yi, or actually I think it's pronounced e, but it's spelled yi, and it means intention. And what that intention is actually the frequency of light in the body. And so the whole chakra system that people learn in like the New Age or whatever, it's actually really true. And what if you study Gurdjieff, not not any of his students, but Gurdjieff himself, he calls it the gravitational center, the center of gravity in somebody's body. So essentially, when somebody goes through puberty, it gets hardwired. And he says how most people are a number 2 person, which means, like in terms of Buddhism, you're controlled by the lower emotions. And so the frequency of light for a number 2 person is still in their lower body. And like Chen Yulin, he told me, if you need to fully open up the second chakra to then fully open up the third eye. So the second chakra in Taoism is what they call the lower dantian, or the elixir field. So in terms of meditation, you have to restore the yin qi, which is the negative ions, to increase the yang qi, which is the positive ions. And then what you're doing is then you rotate your eyes, and this is in chapter 6. um, that's a nice compliment. Thank you. Actually, okay, this is another good book. Patrick Doherty, he's a psychologist who lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and he was one of Chen Lin's early advanced students. And one time I ran into him at the mall, and he had just come out of a movie, and I was going in to see the movie, and we were both alone. And I was sitting on the bench, waiting for the movie to end so I could go in. And he came out, and he's talking to me, and I could sense all this heat, this strong heat emanating out of his heart. And I didn't say anything about it because obviously I'm like, oh, you got really strong heat coming from your heart. Like, you just don't say that to somebody. It's a weird thing to say. But, when I felt that heat, actually, I had seen auras coming out of one time he gave what they call, we would have these guild meetings at this University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. And it was like practice meetings on the weekends. And he gave a talk for one of those guild meetings. And I could see his aura. I could see the yellow light like shooting out of the top of his body. And so this book is this is a fun book because he goes through. It's a memoir of his life and how he eventually discovered qigong. But he was a Vietnam vet, and so it's pretty intense. And the thing is that the when he says wholehearted embrace, it's like the once the third eye opens up, the only way it can do that is through the heart. And then excuse me, yeah, qigong master Jim Nance, he what he did was he went on sabbatical for a few months where he just meditated all the time. So I have his memoir here, and he actually asked me to help him on his memoir way back in 2005, and then he finally got it published in what 2025, 2024. So it only took him like 20 years to, but he had this big heart awakening that in it was kind of weird because after 2005 I didn't contact him again until 2013, and he's like, I just finished this sabbatical, like I contacted him right afterwards, and I had no idea he had just finished this like 2 or 3 month sabbatical nonstop meditation. And he said he had this really big heart awakening because you could have your third eye fully open, but you're still not in Vedic philosophy, they call it eternal liberation. And it's Ramana Maharshi describes this as cutting the knot of your spiritual ego in your heart. So you go like beyond death through the heart. And then he actually gave me that experience a little bit. We were in the car and I was ranting about politics while I'm driving. I was talking about Cargill destroying the planet. And Cargill's the largest private corporation in the world, and they're based in Minnesota. And I'm going on and on. And first he's like, but Drew, I'm on your side, because I'm driving and he's sitting next to me. And I didn't really believe him. I just kept ranting. And then he's just completely quiet. And then all of a sudden I get this really strong shock, like deep in the right side of my heart, just to feel this really strong, like electrical shock. And I immediately shut up, obviously. And so I'm just driving there. Just sudden, that's the only thing that would shut me up. And then all of a sudden he says, I just wanted to see if you were speaking from your heart. And you were. And when he said that to me, I'm like, oh great. Like not only did he give me that deep like shock in my heart, like the right side of my heart. And since I had done research, I knew immediately that if you study that book, Taoist Yoga, Alchemy, and Immortality, they call it the Tiger Channel. So the Tiger Channel, it connects from your reproductive organ up through the brain and then down to the right side of the heart, and that's your right side vagus nerve. And they call it a restraining vein, but it's connected with the vagus nerve because, like in praying mantis, I have a video, all these videos of energy demonstrations. And the praying mantis, the martial arts masters, they can suck their reproductive organ back inside their body, and they do that through a really strong right side vagus nerve reaction. And that's what they call the kundalini energy. It's like the reptilian nervous system, that right side vagus nerve. So I have the more details of that in my free training manual. And now I got to go out and it's like I can't like purify my energy, because when you meditate seriously, you don't eat food. They call it bigu, and so food is basically like a toxic, like it's not purified enough compared to the photons. So, all right. Well, thanks for your Let me rant. I gotta go Christmas shopping.